Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to School of Love. And I'm here with Kaeleigh Moffit. And we're just getting to know each other. And we're going to be talking, about True Mother. And let's see what we can learn from each other. And Kaeleigh, so I kind of know what you do, but not exactly. So, Women's Federation, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm the
Okay.
president of Women's Federation in the US.
Okay, wow. And are you the first second gen to be the president, maybe of any country, Women's Federation?
There in the US, yes, but the Japan president is a second gen. She's also now our international president. She is like one of the oldest second generation out there, so she
Wow.
led the way. But Mother specifically asked for a second gen president for Women's Fed last year, and it ended up being me.
Wow, nice. And yeah, were you totally on board or did you have to like, I don't know, reflect a bit? Is that what you want?
Yeah, it was definitely a process. My background is I worked with youth for, like 15 years of my life as a youth pastor and at the national level. And then I was assigned to work for UPF for 2 years. And it was at the end of that where this opportunity came up. And I never saw myself there. I wouldn't say I was like maybe I'm like a little bit of a feminist, but not enough to care that much or speak about women or, kind of quiet about it. But I think those years in UPF was a time where I was really deepening my relationship with Mother and spending a lot of time studying her words and just trying to capture her essence. And I really started to, I think, awaken my own understanding of like being a daughter of God and a woman and what that means. And, when I was first approached about the role, I turned it down. I went through the process, I talked with people, and I was like, yeah, maybe it's not the right fit for me because there are many different issues. But eventually it just kept pushing at my heart. And now Kimi was the president in America at the time, and he was the one really pushing it. And he phrased it this way. He said, I really feel America needs to hear Mother's heart. And I think Women's Fed is the best place to do it, and you're the best person for it. And then, of course, what I can't say no to that. So it's been about a year and a few months since I became president.
That sounds really awesome. It makes me think of True Father when he got his mission. It's like first, no, no, okay, yes.
I think we all go through those kinds of things when a big opportunity comes, a lot of fear, a lot of doubt, a lot of worry, but in the end, God pushes us, right?
hmm Yeah, nice. Yeah, I got really excited to talk with you because, in Europe, I don't know if you know, we just had a big festival
Yeah.
where True Mother was invited, and yeah, she hasn't been here since 5 years. So yeah, it was a big thing. And like all of us, we all got really excited, and so many people invested into it. And then I was also helping to organize things for families, which was, yeah, I was happy to do something. But then I was asked like if I want to be in the green room with True Mother. And also didn't feel like the right person for that. But I was like, I'm not going to say no. Like, this
Right.
is a chance. Um, so yeah, I got to just join on that day and be in the green room. And I got to see her really closely and also hear her in the green room. Of course, she's not going to give a speech in the green room. She's more there to relax and meditate. But of course, I still kind of had hopes, to somehow strengthen my own bond with her through this tiny little experience. And yeah, I mean, it was a nice experience for sure, but like for me, I feel like it just kind of mm, just gave me a little taste of the relationship that I actually want to have,
Mhm.
that I don't yet have. And so that's why I also think your work is so awesome, that you're just really trying to get True Mother's heart understood and out there. And yeah, that's also what I want to understand. So yeah, I've just been reflecting about my experience, because I was kind of like, there was like a room divider, so all the people that are there to help with coffee or cake or whatever aren't like, just there standing and looking at your mother the whole time. And so I was more behind the scenes. So yeah, I didn't feel so connected at that time. But then when she left, like she just gave a really big smile. Like she got into her car and then she rolled the window down, and I felt like she was smiling at me, although we were a few people. But yeah, I just thought, especially because she's talking now about we really need to try to understand her while she's here on Earth, right?
Right.
And so that's why, yeah, I feel like I want to do that. And also, I feel like, yeah, I'm working now for School of Love, and I think that also must be important to her. And I'd really like to, yeah, understand her heart and also try to get a feeling of what I and we can do in our own families from her perspective. Yeah, so I went home and then I was like, I'm going to listen to Kaeleigh's podcast so I can try to understand her mother. And it's great. So for people who don't know, Kaeleigh does a podcast called TM Radio, right? And they'll read a speech from True Mother and then discuss usually with a few other BCs. And yeah, I listened to a few, the one about the fish in the aquarium was really nice. Where True Mother talks about 4 generations of fish living in one aquarium. And then, yeah, there was another one, Shifting the Culture, that I mentioned to you about. And I just thought it was cool that I happened to listen to that one, because it's not like True Mother's main focus in the speech, but she does mention purity. And it was just kind of like laid out on the table. Like we talk about living a pure life in our church. And like you also said in that podcast, like she didn't really go into it, but she put it out there for us to all recognize. And yeah, so yeah, just again, awesome what you do. And so, yeah, you said like already when you were working with UPF that you were already trying or maybe getting to know True Mother better then. What do you think helped you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that podcast that you mentioned, I haven't done it in many months because I've been really busy, but I think that podcast is like an example of a big part of that journey. I was working for UPF, which was a very intense environment and masculine environment, and I was, like 30 years younger than everybody I was working with, so like just very different culture. And I found myself kind of like, when you work with youth in youth ministry, it's a different spirit. It's much more like grounded and like loving and that kind of stuff. So I was really missing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I needed to kind of develop strength in myself because I can see whatever path I'm on, I really need to like develop my own way to feel Heavenly Parent and not be kind of pushed around by other people and environments. So I started to just read Mother's words more often on my own. And then with just a few close sisters, I started doing it started as a weekly meeting where we would do similar to the podcast. I would choose some selections, I would share my thoughts, and then we would just kind of discuss. And it was becoming such a rich environment for us that I felt like, okay, like it needs to be offered to others because this space isn't available. I never, grew up hearing some of the things that Mother had talked about in the last, 15 years. And that's a problem. Somehow, like the information was not being trickled down in the way that it needed to be. So I felt like, how could we share this with others, which is where the podcast came. And originally I thought it would just be me doing my thing, but I realized that in the sisterhood group, as I was like, what other people would share would be just as like enriching for myself as what I would be sharing. And so this idea of, the community expression and learning from one another really became the key. And that's why there's always different voices being featured, right? It's not just one person knows the right way, but it's the family that can work together on it. So I think, mother's words, and this is still my habit. Like when I'm feeling dry or confused or frustrated or missing that spark, I try to study mother's words, but it's different when you study it with others, when you're discussing together. Like reading Hundoke is one thing. It's very good to do, changes your environment. But to like really be discussing with people, I think like such a deeper understanding, being able to read between the lines. It's like the Bible talks about where three or more are gathered together, that's where God's spirit comes to dwell. I think similarly, like it's like a condition you make when you're doing it together. It's like you can channel a spirit that's not your own. And I think that's how many of us have come to have a deeper relationship with Mother, by learning from one another and creating the space and honoring where each of us are at. And it's a very like yin type of experience. You make the space so it can be filled with, true Mother's spirit, true Mother's heart. Whereas when we're like always teaching and we think we have the right answer, there's not so much space for that, right? We're filling it with our own stuff. So it's like making the environment and the space to connect with Mother.
Nice. And would you say, like, you said sharing with other people, like, doesn't matter, any crowd? I mean, like, of course, people that are also interested in True Mother's words. Or do you feel like, more of a, like amongst peers, that it's more of a, enriching experience? Or
Well, it's an interesting question. Because, one of the things we're doing in Women's Fed is we're really trying to promote Mother's words as an essential peace philosophy and something that is relevant to anybody, no matter what faith background you come from or your history or your affiliation, that Mother's words, we feel, really unlock something for people. So we've started a program called Her Tribe, where we build a curriculum centered on Mother's words. And it's all meant for anybody, your neighbors, your friends, your guests, whatever you want to call them. And we build a program around it. So Mother's words are the center of it. You read like 2 or 3 paragraphs from her on a topic. Then we build in like discussion questions. And people are bringing guests and people are bringing their longtime friends that they've been wondering, how do I open the door? How do I take the next step? I'm not ready to bring people to church, right? That's sometimes like a big jump for people. But to be an environment like this, which is, these providential organizations are supposed to build a witnessing environment. That was the language we were using for many years. So I feel like it's a good example of connecting to True Mother in this non-confronting, non-religious way, but just in a like introspective way of how do I grow myself? How do I have better relationships? How do I, know who I am more? And it opens up a door for you to have a relationship with Mother. So I think my answer is, of course, it's easier, in your small little network of friends of your same age and same life phase, people who believe similar things to you. And I think that's where it started for me too, that was a safe place to kind of explore that for myself. But I'm finding more and more, like as we reach out and as we share, even just within our movement, different generations, the more that I lean into True Mother internally, then the stronger I feel. And there were definitely times where like I'd have to speak in front of people or, share something where I'm like jittery and have nervousness and not feeling confident. But I realize, in those moments, I'm trying to speak from myself. And that's not actually what I want to do. I want to be, I call like an ambassador for Mother in everything I do as a Women's Fed president, right? I really want to channel that. And when I can like really lean into Mother's spirit, then the confidence overflows and people receive it differently because it's not coming from me. It's coming from a, a heavenly spirit that is not limited like mine. So I think we all have to push ourselves to go out further than is comfortable, but that everybody, no matter where you're at, can find some kind of healing when we can open up the door with True Mother.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely relate to the jitters. And then I always also need to remind myself it's not for my sake. I want to do this for a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I can imagine, like you also mentioned in because this fish story was such a great story for children. Do you also have these like the curriculum sounds really awesome, and do you ever have it like in a family setting also with
Mm.
your kids?
No, we haven't gone that far, but one of the things we did start developing is a children's version of Mother of Peace, Mother's Memoir. And it was because of those kinds of experiences. Also, like the network that I work with is a lot of young moms. So it's very natural that like we're looking for that kind of resource. And also realizing, this is the stuff that's in there is relevant to everybody if you can do it the right way. So we did the first book of it, which is just the preface. We're almost done with the second book, which is chapter 1, and we want to keep going through each chapter. But one day we'll get there. We will keep developing, doing
Yeah,
it in the family setting. Absolutely.
that's a great idea to start with a memoir and make it for kids. Yeah, so um yeah, with School of Love, we're talking about how can we talk about sexuality with our kids. And so True Mother, like she also mentioned in this one speech, Shifting Culture, that you guys read, like she hopes for young people to look into the creation and really get their answers just through principles of creation and like see, I don't know, how the trees grow, for example, or how the animals interact, and
Right.
which I find really beautiful. And I also, yeah, I also received a quote from Chung Sung-kyung where True Father says something similar that, yeah, that I don't know actually the year when he said it, but that children don't need to learn about sex super early, but they need to look into nature and find, yeah, and learn from nature. But the thing is, I feel like I love this idea, but unfortunately in our society, like you learn things uh, before the nature tells you, and not in the nice way, like different versions that are not directly from God. Yeah, so I've been kind of wondering about this, and I mean, I guess one strategy could be to go out into nature more, like try to separate a bit from this technology culture, or yeah, just different settings where we might learn about, or our children might learn about sexuality in a not so, yeah, appropriate way, or just not exactly how God sees it. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that speech. And I think the one that you mentioned we read in the podcast, and um, I feel like I can't remember like the words exactly, but the spirit that came up was that Mother was kind of like calling out the way that we have done things as a movement, but in a very gentle way, which is her way. And that's why it's so important to like read between the lines, like why did she say that? Sometimes it can be random, but it's very intentional and strategic the way that she says and talks about things. So I think in that speech, she was talking to a group of young people. And what came up for me was just like, I don't know how you were raised, but in my culture in the church, it was the fall. Like the fall was everything that you learned about. And we were separated by boys and girls. And, if you're ever talking to a boy too much, your counselors would come and talk to you and separate you. And, it's like this kind of culture. And it created this like strict, harsh environment where actually you never experienced a pure culture of brother-sister relationship. And that's why so many of my generation and older, it was a repressive culture, unfortunately, I have to say. And the family has a lot to do with that. Everybody's family is different. So many were fine, but others had even horrible experiences. So I think, by the time I went and got blessed, I there was just the line was like so harsh between being single and being blessed. You never like could build your way there. Just it wasn't healthy. Of course, my husband and I navigated and we were good friends beforehand, so it was okay. But the way Mother talks about it, and you had messaged me earlier about what does Mother say about sexuality, and the truth is she doesn't say anything about sexuality, which is very interesting. Why is that? Why? I remember in America, we had Dr. Young who was here and he was reading Father's speeches every morning for morning devotion. And there was a whole few months where we were talking about absolute sex. And, Father loved that topic. And, I'm hearing from all like my brother counterparts about like how this is such good content and da, 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 da. And one brother asked me, he was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Well, I'm curious what your mother has to say about this topic." It's
Mhm.
like it's always from a masculine perspective. And I'm not sure, women think about it the same way. We do think about sex, but it's I don't know. For me, I often feel like there's this overemphasis on it because of the culture we live in, which is where you're coming from, right? Like we can't not talk about it because otherwise our children are going to be stuck learning all the wrong things and we did not set them up for success. But on the flip side, like the overemphasis on it in the way that we were brought up about, how sex before marriage is bad and, you shouldn't have those desires was also horrible and didn't teach you to create harmony within yourself and be in touch with what you're feeling and catch the impulses and figure out where they were coming from. My friend and vice president of Women's Fed in USA, Katerina, just wrote this paper for her doctorate on, the masculine versus feminine approach to mind-body unity.
Mm.
And so she looked at Father's quotes about mind-body unity, which is very dominant, and it's, repress the bodily desires and have, ownership over it and that kind of thing. But Mother's words on mind and body unity is more cohesive, like a circle, like a flow and a harmony. And she talks about like being one with God's heart. Father talked about it too, of course. But I think, coming from a masculine culture and also an older culture, it is a more repressive environment. You have to cut off, right? You have to cut off from the evil things. But what Mother brings is like this harmonious feeling, which is the feminine motherly touch, right? That it's not about just like discarding all those things. It's like embracing it in your cycle and being aware of it. And how do you deal with it? This kind of culture comes about. So bringing it back to the original question about purity and nature, I think that when Mother talks, she's also talking to future generations. So the way that she teaches is for future generations when the world is different and when the environment is different. Ideally, we learn about it very naturally, and our children will just learn about, intimacy and sex by being in our family and naturally talking about it and it being an expression of selflessness and true love versus right now, which is really about selfishness and getting what I want and what I need. So yeah, I feel like the way that we're heading now, I think young people who are being raised in our church, I already saw in youth ministry, each generation, it got better in terms of how these topics were talked about. And certainly, when I was a youth pastor, we did not go heavy on the fall and things like that. And in truth, Mother doesn't even talk about the fall anymore. She talks about Adam and Eve fell away from God. That's her main point, is that they lost their connection with God, which is the essence of all of our sexuality problems too, right? It's our oneness with God and our closeness with God. So um, I went on there, so I'll let I'll pass it back to you.
No problem. But yeah, I love this idea though of because I'm also thinking, yeah, we learn through nature, but then us parents, we kind of, we're still the first ones to bring it up to our
Yeah.
kids. Because, yeah, like I know maybe when we were kids, at least, I mean, I grew up in America, so we weren't, it was like a suburb, so we weren't as, like, my parents didn't just let me go run to the playground alone. We had to be driven always. But my husband, for example, growing up in Germany 10 years ago, he could just walk to a playground and be in nature pretty much the whole day without his mother running after him. And so I think that's kind of like how True Father was thinking of it, like kids just going out in nature, and like what he also writes about in his books, where like a bee is sucking the nectar of a flower, and how that's such a strong, yeah, like it's so intoxicating that it doesn't want to stop drinking. And also what I think, like that's also kind of like what True Mother's getting at, but yeah, more ideally in the future maybe. But I think maybe we can already lead towards that as parents, to just yeah, take these times, like if we go on a walk in nature, or even just in the garden, then we can just notice things and explain it to our children, like use it as um, an open textbook, like a little mini documentary live for our kids. Um, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I'm trying to do that, but it's also, I mean, it's really interesting because I then realize what I don't know. Because, like, sometimes you see two bugs that are connected to each other, and then it's like, yeah, look, they're going to make baby bugs. They're having a sexual relationship. But then it's kind of like, wait, how does that work? Because sometimes how they connect, like the other day we were at the lake and there were dragonflies, and they're connected, but yeah, different. Like one is connected to the head, and so anyway, then we get to learn together, for example. Um, yeah, because I don't know everything, and um, yeah, I just tell my kids, "Wow, we're gonna have to look that up." Yeah.
Yeah. As your kids get older too, they stump you. So many times every day a kid will ask me a question and I'm like, I don't know that answer. We'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
They're inquisitive, right? They're curious and wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we kind of came from a similar generation. What year are you born?
88.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Okay, great. We're dragons. It's our year.
Yeah, it's our year. I told another dragon that the other day. Yeah, cool. But yeah, I grew up more from Seattle. And which side of America were
Yeah,
you?
I grew up in Maryland, so yeah,
Uh-huh,
opposite
okay.
sides.
Yeah, our paths never crossed till now. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And I was also like, it's also interesting what you said, like, why doesn't she talk about this right now? One thing that occurred to me today when I was thinking about that is maybe True Father said it all because he has said so much about sexuality. Um, I mean, maybe she feels like he covered it. Yeah. But yeah, of course, we don't know. I mean, maybe it's still coming. Maybe, she'll add more to it um, in the
Yeah, I mean,
future.
I think it's like a pretty complex situation. Mother has been sharing also more honestly about like, do you know what it was like to marry a man who was so much older than you?
Yeah.
And I think it's like the first time in the last few years where Mother has been that honest about it and not even revealing anything, but just saying, do you understand? And with tears, right? Expressing what that was like. And of course, I can imagine what that means. So I feel like there were parts of True Parents' life where they also could not experience what they were talking about, the schools, the family of love, right? They didn't have time to spend with their family. They didn't have time to spend just as a couple building their relationship and learning how to have a sexual relationship and learning how to have intimacy and I'm not saying they didn't have closeness. Certainly that's apparent in, even Mother's memoir. She talks about how much she and Father talked and how much they loved each other and all of that. But I just feel like the reality of marrying somebody who's over 20 years older than you is, you know, physically different, a different challenge, and desires are different and things like that. So I'm kind of curious about that. I think as a woman also, from that time, being born in 1940 in Korea, which is, especially for women, a more repressive culture. And, being married to an older man and being around a lot of strong Korean men for your formative years of young adulthood. I'm curious how much Mother could explore what that looks like as a wife and a woman. And yeah, I'm very curious. And I know this is not like something people talk about, but I think it's important for us to understand that true parents had to kind of do all the hard things that we don't have to do. And now we have the blessing of like really creating true families and creating true marriages and becoming true women and all of that, which I think is complex. Yeah, just Mother couldn't even spend time with her children, and Father was always around out there, and Mother had her children by herself many times, all that kind of stuff. It's like that's it's very hard to create a family. You work for School of Love, right? So like it's I don't know if true parents really got to experience it, and it may be evident in many of their children right now, which is a deep heartache for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm also totally curious about how that was for True Mother, and it must have been really interesting because, like you said, back then the culture was repressed. But on the other hand, she had a husband who was speaking very openly about sexuality, and it was like I don't know, it was um, like a bomb in the room, probably, like how he
Yeah.
addressed it. It was like a shock. Like even it's like a little bit shocking now reading back now, but back then it was
Yeah.
like crazy. And yeah, so she was married to him on the other hand. So how interesting that must have been for her.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure she probably learned so much herself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would be awesome to actually know more from her. But yeah, I also understand as a woman, like you also, in some ways, you're just cautious about sexuality when you speak about it. Like, you don't want to speak about it with someone who you just feel you can't really trust. And yeah, which is, I mean, it's just unfortunate if maybe that, I don't know if that's what's stopping her, but
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of layers to it. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but like the way Father talked, I don't remember like getting the talk from my parents growing up, but I remember Father's words about like concave and convex and only your wife has the key to your private parts and like that kind of stuff. I feel like that's that's where I learned about sex is from Father's words, which is very
wow.
interesting.
That's awesome because I don't know. I mean, I learned just through different pieces of information growing up, and also just never actually asking anyone directly. And it's the question like, why didn't I just ask directly? I did ask my father once during a car ride, and he kind of pushed the question away, and so
Yeah.
I never asked again. And that's also why I feel yeah, so strongly that we need to really take in these questions of our kids. And if we say, I'm going to get back to you, then really get back to them about
Yeah.
the questions and, yeah, give them the best honest answer that we can give.
I think that's really key is like if we're creating relationships with our kids where there's openness and curiosity and okay with weird questions or inappropriate questions, we don't overreact, we don't create shame and blame, then when our children are ready, they can bring those questions to us, and then we just have to continue this like open experience. And I know with my kids, like I bought a series, a friend that suggested it to me, um, basically like books for children about sex that are for several age demographics. So my oldest is 10, my youngest is 6, and each of them are very different personalities, so they need different things. Like my oldest is just very pure minded and takes things at face value and doesn't need to question. And so, one of the books I read with her almost was like uncomfortable for me to read just because of my own shame and things like that. But, it goes really in depth about like the penis into the vagina and erection and stuff like that. And I'm like so uncomfortable reading this with my daughter. And I was like, "Do you have any questions?" It's made very well. It's not like anything strange. And she was like, "No, okay, great." She like doesn't, it's like totally fine. But my second daughter is much more like, she likes to challenge things and wants it to make sense. And so she has a lot more questions about things. And, it's about creating that like open environment where it's, of course, I have my moments where I'm like, okay, you're like 7. Okay, I'll like answer your questions. But if I can do that, right, then she will come to me when she's hearing things from her friends. And, I try to say, if you ever have questions or you hear something, you can always come talk to me. And my kids are still in elementary school, so they're not exposed to so much. But I know middle school is around the corner, and that's where a lot of things are opened up for them. So getting ready for that very soon.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome to just that we just show our kids, look, I can also answer awkward things, and it's okay to be awkward with me. Um, yeah, and just create this relationship where you're ready to be vulnerable also as a parent, because maybe they'll also feel vulnerable just bringing something up. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm also just trying to think, like, maybe envision, I guess I have to take more time to do this, but like how would true mother answer these questions? Like
Yeah.
if our kids went to her with these questions, how would she answer them? Um, I think she would really honor them and not be like, why are you asking that? Or that's not for you to know now. I
Right.
mean, I'm sure she would think of at least something, like even if it's simple, something to say. And that's also the awesome way nature can play into it, because it can also be simple, but maybe it could also answer some questions that the kids might have.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, you did the speech that you were talking about, the fish, is when mother was speaking to the children age. Even when you watch it, but even when you read it, it's like she speaks differently to them. Not just from a children's point of view, but I think with like there's nothing from the fallen world and the past and the problems that comes into that. It's just hope and a pure response. It's how God intended it. So I think you're right. I can totally imagine if, little kids came to True Mother and asked a very interesting question, where do babies come from? I think Mother would be happy and joyful about expressing that this is how God created it, and with no of the other stuff that we're still working out in our own hearts. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like when she talks, like, um, she really brings in the whole big picture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like,
Yeah.
like she talks about, yeah, Heavenly Parent had this intention, and um, you know, I think she would bring that all also into the answer. I know when I'm talking to my kids, maybe I need to work on that a little bit more, because sometimes, I I explain things, but then it's kind of like I explain how the world sees it today, and then also how we want to strive to see it more ideally. And so I kind of explain these two sides, but I feel like I could do more in like going back in time, and be like, Heavenly Parent had this big plan, where, I don't know, just as an example, like a man and a woman um, go through their growth stages and then have this amazing relationship when they're ready, or just, yeah, something kind of considering all this history and investment that God put in, and now, yeah, also maybe even bringing true parents into it and how they have revived this dream of God's. Um, yeah, I still have to. I didn't really talk about that so much, honestly, with my kids yet. How true parents really play into, especially, um, yeah, the sexual relationship. Also, like how that also becomes more of something that belongs to God rather than, yeah, us coming from Satan's lineage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the phrasing mother often uses is Heavenly Parent's dream. And you said it too, that that is what she always starts with, almost in every speech, is what was Heavenly Parent's dream, and then what happened, and that's why we have problems in the world. And then she talks about, the only begotten daughter. So I think everything you just said is, it's like her speeches, they're not always like repetitive, but the theming is very similar. And I think she's trying to kind of model what she hopes to see with education moving forward, which is even with the divine principle, she's encouraging us to I think not focus so much on like the fall and the problems and restoration and the theology behind it, but the essence of Heavenly Parent's dream. And she's encouraging like principles of creation and true parents' life, that these are kind of the core things that we need to learn, which I'm encouraged by for my own children, that I think a lot of the education I received was not built for me. It was built for convincing Christians that this theology was correct. But in true, like as a blessed child, then I need to learn like what was I supposed, how am I supposed to be brought up, which is Heavenly Parent's dream, principles of creation, and kind of the role that Jesus and true parents play in that. um, yeah, I feel like it's much more liberating and hopeful for my children. I'm so happy I don't have to grill them on how to prove that the apple, the fruit was not a fruit, and all that kind of stuff, which we all had to give lecture contests about. Yeah, I'm grateful that some of these shifts that mother is making, I think, come from her own upbringing, because she grew up closer to second generation because of her mom and her grandma being these, all out religious, basically missionary types. So she knew what it was like for your parents to be off, and, her mom left for a while to go do things. Her grandma took care of her. So I feel like she resonates with us on a much deeper level because she grew up closer to what we are, and that's why she's trying to make space for it. She's trying to make sure that the children have a space, right, through these Hyojung Nori services and programs. And I know when she came to Vegas maybe 3 years ago, for just a small leaders meeting, I remember Dr. Jenkins was telling me that, mother was expressing that there was a loneliness of growing up because of kind of her lifestyle. And so that's why she's so urgent about taking care of the children, that she doesn't want them to experience loneliness. She really wants them to feel Heavenly Parent's love and have the environment that Heavenly Parent envisioned. So, it's really encouraging as a mom, right? This is the
Mm.
things that our church were missing for most of our lives. So it's very encouraging to see.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, I was just thinking also, um, like true mother, she comes from such a different generation that I
Yeah,
think like sexuality today is also so different from what it was when she was growing up, and
it's true.
maybe yeah, like her teenager times, for example. um, Definitely very, very different challenges than today. So yeah, although I know she tries to really address like world problems in modern day times. Yeah, like I myself, I didn't really have so many pornography struggles. So, or I didn't even ever watch it. So I feel like I'm not the person to talk to people about
That's true.
pornography.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, it could be that maybe, yeah, she lets other people, hopefully who she really trusts, talk about these things. And she does talk about pure water, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if, what do you think? Like, do you feel like that also is kind of just addressing this really pure lifestyle? Yeah, I mean, of having no contaminations in the
Right.
water, which is maybe your spirit or, yeah, in your life.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point that um I mean, mother herself talks about like being raised very pure, right, and protected from the environment around her. So even in that time, yes, it was different, but even more so, she was really like, sheltered. Maybe shelter's not the right word, but protected from
Mhm.
the environment to be raised as a pure daughter, because that was something she had to achieve. So it's interesting to think about. Yeah, it's a good point I haven't considered before, that the way she speaks is from that perspective because she hasn't experienced, did not grow up experiencing an over sexualized culture, or, being inundated with the shows and the movies and the music that you listen to about sexuality and sex. She doesn't know what that's like, so she can't speak from it. And in that way, it's kind of like when she talks about pure water, she's talking about her experience too, but it's kind of the more ideal place where we all should be heading. And for me, the message I get from the pure water analogy is the importance of movement. And so even when there are impurities and there is dirt and there is sediments building up, the point is the river has to flow and then it will naturally become more clean and sediments will fall to the bottom. But if it's like, stuck in one place, like lake water is feels much more dirty than when you're at a river, right? So that's the message I get, that it's so important that we are growing, but also her message behind that is also sharing, that if we're not like sharing about Heavenly Parent and true parents with others in our life, then all this rich truth that we have naturally will, eventually become contaminated because it's not flowing. And it's yeah, in terms of purity, that is a much better analogy than I feel like I was raised with in our church, which, had more judgment, right? Had more fear drilled into us about this kind of relationship. So I can certainly talk to my children about that.
Yeah. Do you feel like, does any analogy come into your head from your childhood?
Well, one like really, bad line that I remember and had heard from others about, if you fall, then this, and I don't even know if that's
Yeah.
worth repeating on a podcast,
Yeah. No, I totally remember those times.
Yeah.
But I feel like True Mother is also really trying to change that, like
Yeah.
if you notice the last few years, there's been, like opportunities for even people who, went a different way.
Yeah.
And I love that because I feel like, we talk about God forgiving everyone, and Jesus says also, what was it? 70 times 7, you can
Right.
forgive someone. And so why as a parent should I not forgive my child, for everything that they do? And I'm sure true parents also um, want to model that as well. I mean, yeah, true father speaks, like you said, very strongly, and also, um, you know, uh, really black and white.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know the answers, but maybe that was just really to get people going in the right direction. Or I don't know if he felt like he needed to give that strong, affectionate fatherly love in that way at the time. But yeah, it feels like True Mother is really being more embracing and yeah, absolute love, like
Yeah.
modeling that. And yeah, that's definitely something that I want. That's always what I want to strive for my kids. Like I try to tell them all the time, we love you no matter what. And I want them to feel that so that they can also be able to tell me anything and not feel like they have to hide it. Because, oh, if mom hears that, she might not be happy or, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, when I think that probably father felt like he had to really make a line between good and evil. But my all my friends who have left the church can understand, why I'm still around, and especially as being a mom, they can't understand how you could raise your children the way that we were raised. But for me, I feel the culture is very different. And I feel that, like you're saying, mother's approach to it is very different. And it all comes full circle because I think what was missing in our experience being raised was the motherly approach. We experienced father's strong energy. That's all I remember growing up is father speaking and crazy things father would say and fatherly energy from all the leaders, right? It was that kind of spirit, and that's kind of where mother's coming from now is actually this ingredient, the most crucial ingredient of the motherly perspective was missing from all of human history, but even from true parents and from the providence, is that the only begotten daughter role was not understood. And I resonate with that very deeply because I think so much of our upbringing could have been healed if we had both sides of the story. You need a father and a mother. But we, as second generation, older second gen, didn't experience that growing up. And it's just what happened. And it's sad. And I think mother's kind of bringing that forward now. But I can see, like, for those of my friends who have left, if they had had that more embracing experience, how different it would have been for them. So that's why I have more hope for these guys who are younger. They don't remember father at all. Actually, like they don't have any memory of seeing father, or that spirit of father, and so they feel raised by mother, and it's a very different generation than our generation. It's not that everyone has baggage, but it's not the same baggage that we had. So I think that balance is so important, and that's why it's really hopeful to see the the motherly spirit coming through and what that means for our children. So it's, I think our generation, like you're saying, we are sensitive to making sure our kids know that they are loved no matter what, because I think we didn't necessarily feel that growing up. And there was shame and blame. Not that my parents were good parents, they did the best they could, but there was still all of that mixed into our culture and in the greater generation, not just our church. So it's very interesting to see our generation of parents. We're very sensitive to it because we want to correct that mistake of our own experience being brought up also.
Yeah. Yeah. So many good points. And um, yeah, like I like what you said, that it's the time is really changing because of what your mother's way of doing things. I
Yeah,
never thought about how, yeah, back then just her role was kind of missing, and that's why it was maybe so harsh. I
yeah,
never thought about that, but that's really interesting to think about. Um, and but yeah, on the other hand, still like we need a father and a mother. Like it makes me think of sometimes if something happens in our family or if there's some issue, like there's just something I need to talk about with my daughter. Like sometimes I think, oh, because like I'll just say my husband is more the strict one and I'm more the empathy one. And so like I do have thoughts like, oh, should I really talk to him about that? Because I know he'll be quite absolute.
right.
But then I think I should, like, his take is also important. These are our kids. They're not just mine. And so although I do feel it's important that I get my say in there, like really, really important, that we both raise our kids together and address the issues together. Um, because I have this priority, you know, like I want them to feel loved and not pressured to do certain things. And he is more, I mean, of course, thinking about that, but then um, maybe, yeah, just has a different way of doing things where, um, you know, he's also thinking of like, how do we want to raise our children and what do we want to strive for? And so I just think it's so important that we do things together because
Yeah.
so that our kids get a taste of both of these things and that we also learn as a couple like how we can even just speak to our kids or um yeah raise them in a loving way and but also really guiding them like we wish to. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And what comes with that is the rubbing off of sharp edges between parents, right? If your parenting style is very different, a lot of that comes from your own stuff and your own upbringing, and you have to learn, like, okay, I'm not always right. I do need both. And to meet in the middle where harmony and unity come, I think is the most powerful place to be. God's dream, coming back to that, that was God's dream,
Mm.
right?
Right. Yeah. So I guess we should wrap up because we've spoken for an hour, which was really fun. Um, but yeah, like I just wanted to kind of maybe sum up in a few sentences because I feel like yeah, we're all trying to really understand True Mother and like I said, I feel like that's something important to strive for, especially while she's here. What can we say to our audience? Like, because I just say from my own experience, I really doubted, like, how can I really get to know her just through reading? That's just thoughts that I've had. Um, but unfortunately, I didn't even like really try. I really should. But if you think about it, like if you really read about someone's life, or even like if you watch a movie, you feel quite close to the main character. So I do feel like I need to work more on just even reading her words because, yeah, we don't have the opportunity to spend time with her every day. That's usually the best way to get to know someone. But yeah, because we don't have that, yeah, I guess like reading words is something that I guess we can say to suggest to people who want to really get to know your mother. But yeah, what would you say, Kaeleigh?
Yeah, I think it's like that question is, how do you build a relationship with anybody? Of course, this one is difficult because, like you said, we're not talking to Mother, and people are surprised when they find out. Like, I haven't had so many personal experiences with Mother. You know, it's been in a big stadium with everybody else, or in a leaders meeting, or just recently was my first time speaking in front of her and giving her a report. Um, but somehow I've still been able to develop this personal relationship with her. And I think it comes down to my investment. What I'm thinking about and what matters to me is what becomes real. So am I making time for it? Does it matter enough to me that I want to make time for it? That's really like the harsh question. We can complain and be like, oh, I don't feel connected to Mother, and then just like fade away. But does it matter enough? We have to like really ask that question. Why does it matter to have a relationship with True Mother? And, for me, what comes out of having a relationship with Mother is it's a vibration with a providence that is indescribable. And I can tell when I'm distant from that and when I need to work back towards getting there, because heaven and spirit world become alive to me. And I can hear God's voice much more clearly in my prayer. I can ask a question, I can get an answer. I can say to spirit world, like, this is what I need to happen. Please perform this miracle. And, it'll happen not exactly the way I want it, but it'll happen to some extent. And that's been my experience. So I think it first starts with like the motivation and the internal commitment. And when that's done, then you make the space for it in your life. Even I do things of like, imagining I'm seeing mother in front of me and talking to her. What would I say to her is very different than just like praying, to the universe. But like if I was sitting in a room with mother and she asked me a question, what the heck would I say? That's very different. And then the really interesting that happens for me in that meditative state is I imagine what she would say back to me. And I have created this like very filial relationship with her because of that. It's a different kind of prayer life because it feels personal. And so when I read words, I'm asking myself, like, why did she say that? Like, what was her motivation? She's a person just like me. I have to make speeches. You have to make speeches and presentations. There's a thought process and motivation. So why is she saying this? What was the reading behind it, meaning behind it? So I think, yeah, commitment and then making the time and making it personal, seeing the value in it. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say is surrounding yourself with like-minded people who want to create that kind of relationship, because that's your community, that's your accountability that keeps you moving forward. When you're by yourself and you don't have anybody to talk to about this, it'll fade. It's like when you're reading a really good book and you want to tell somebody about it, or like you found your new favorite restaurant and you want to share it with people because you want to give and take on something that you love. I think that kind of community is really important to find, to nurture this kind of relationship.
That's so great. Thank you. That's everyone. That's your crash course for getting a personal relationship with True Mother, and also works with True Father, I'm sure too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just say like one thing that really moved me over this weekend with True Mother was a testimony given by a young Moldovan first gen. And yeah, she just was sharing very artistically how she felt so much love from true parents. And I was kind of like, well, I've never really experienced that, but that's beautiful. But then what she shared was also what connects her is she loves what True Mother loves.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's just such a simple thought, but I was like, wow, that connects me with her too.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about School of Love and my goals and like what kind of culture I would like to build. And I'm sure True Mother loves that too,
Yeah.
and True Father.
Absolutely.
And that connects me with them. And I think like, yeah, a lot of just these wonderful goals that many of us are striving for, they really do bring us closer to true parents because that's our common base. Just like if I find someone, I love tigers, and if I find someone else who also has a favorite animal, tiger, we have something in common, and I can share about that. Yeah, but then when it's really connected to values and lifestyle, then I feel like it makes it also so much deeper than just, yeah, tigers or weather or same vacation location. Yeah. So yeah, to get to know those better, I guess the words are again
Yeah.
something that we can, yeah, use to get closer.
I love that analogy. It's a great example. Thank you for sharing it. I will remember it and use it in future things. It's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaeleigh. It was really fun talking with you.
My pleasure. Good to meet you. And until next time.
Yeah, until next time. We'll do this again sometime.
Yes, great. And good luck with everything you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.